The Chinese Communist Party infected this country with a deadly virus with the help of Tony Fauci, and somehow they've turned us into them. It's the irony of our times that a lot of this government fascism with respect to mask mandates, economic lockdowns, vaccine mandates, it's straight out of the Communist Chinese playbook, and they are laughing at us right now.
It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Peter Navarro. He has quite a resume, and he's written many, many books. He is the former Deputy Assistant to President Donald J. Trump, former Assistant to the President for Trade and Manufacturing Policy at the Trump administration, former National Defense Production Act Policy Coordinator, and former Director of the White House National Trade Council. He's also a former Professor of Economics and Public Policy at the Paul Merage School of Business at University of California, Irvine. He's the author of several books, and his latest is In Trump Time, a Journal of America's Plague Year. Peter, welcome. How are you?
Hey, it's great to be with you here. I've got my background here. This is Washington, D.C. This is actually the Trump Hotel, and literally we have In Trump Time there on the clock. And the expression, Jason, was something that I coined early in the administration to mean that in the Trump White House, we got things done as quickly as possible. But it's a bit of a double entendre because it also means that we are in the age of Trump and Trumpism.
Right. Well, I hope that works with this administration. In Biden time, I hope that's very slow and he gets nothing done.
Well, so far that is the norm. Although I would say it's more like a slow water torture because the things he's getting done is basically undoing what we did in the Trump administration. We're setting ourselves up for the worst economy since the 1970s in stagflation.
Yeah, I agree. And I predicted stagflation last February. I just had a feeling the way we would come out of the pandemic with all the money creation would be a stagflationary environment. And it's not exactly for the reasons I thought, though. You know, I didn't anticipate employers and businesses having to compete with the government for talent because the government's rewarded people for sitting at home. And then I did not anticipate the incredible impact of shortages and supply chain issues. I thought those would be resolved by now, but they are just lingering. I'm quite surprised, actually. What do you think about that?
Yeah, interestingly enough, in the In Trump Time book, I talk about the memos I write for the president. And actually in May of 2020, I wrote a memo warning of stagflation that I saw coming if we didn't adequately manage two things. One, our supply chains and bringing home our supply chains. That was really critical. We were having also these pandemic related shocks related to our labor markets. And if you compare what the 70s, let me go walk through this for you. In the 70s, the stagflation was a product of three convergent forces. It was a profligate fiscal policy that began with Lyndon Johnson's guns and butter decision. And that started the inflationary ripple through. We had Arthur Burns as this Fed chairman for Nixon, accommodated that inflation by printing money for Nixon for his reelection. And that was like Katie Barr the door on the inflation part of the stagflation. And then what the Fed did there led to Nixon devaluating the dollar. That went down 30%. And that spiked import prices. So we had all that inflation. And then the stag part comes with the stuff we call cost push inflation from an energy price shock that was from the OPEC oil cartel embargoes. And then we also had food price shocks. It was strange. It was weather related and also some government policies. And lo and behold, and the thing about stagflation, as you know, is that it's the hardest thing for economists to handle. Traditional Keynesian tools cannot deal with simultaneity in recession and inflation. So fast forward now, we've got the same thing going on. We've got the profligate fiscal policy. We've spent trillions already because of the virus, and they're proposing trillions more. We got Jay Powell at the Fed who's printing money and accommodating that. But the most complex thing, and we saw this in the Trump administration, was this pandemic-related set of shocks that we have. We've got certainly supply chain problems, but here's the thing. We got this really weird labor market going on. It's a bifurcated labor market. I talk about this in the In Trump Time book, where you have the Chinese Communist Party virus is like a neutron bomb that's hit our major metropolitan areas. Think about it. It hits the commercial office buildings, the mass transit, and the entertainment and sports districts, right? And if you take like an office building occupancy rate now, it was over 90% before the pandemic. Now in places like New York, Chicago, it can be as low as 30%. Now, it's not just that those folks aren't working in the city. It's that everybody who service that office building, whether the janitors or the restaurants or the beauticians, they don't have any jobs either. So
right, and the maintenance people, of course, too, and the managers, and yeah.
Exactly. And it's kind of like the urban ecosystem, right? It's all gone, right? I call them service sector refugees. So you got this weird thing where you got like 10 million unemployed people, right? At the same time, you got like 10 million job openings, So we've got like downward wage pressure over here, upward wage pressure over here, and labor shortages galore. And on top of that, you've got this universal vaccination policy. And look, who's ever watching this now, whatever your position is on universal vaccinations, just from an economic point of view, if there are some people in the workforce who don't want the jab and who are going to get fired because they don't get it or are going to quit, that simply exacerbates the shortages.
Sure does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Peter, you said so much there, and that was just such a good summation of the 70s. If you're an economist, that's a super interesting decade. Not saying it was good, but very interesting. I've got to ask you, just before we kind of move forward, just to look at history a little more, with all the crazy stuff that went on in the 70s, number one question is Nixon really the big contributor to that? From 50 years ago, August 15th, he cut the last tie to gold. And then at the end of that era, was Paul Volcker the solution to it? I'm kind of curious what your take would be on that.
Yeah, let's get to the 1980. Let's start with Volcker in the 1980. There was this thing that Reagan used to get elected. I'm sure you know this. It's called the misery index, right?
Yep.
And it was the summation of the unemployment rate, which was the stag part of the stagflation, and the inflation rate. And by 1980, that hit 20. Okay, it was over 20%, right? And interest rates, mortgage rates were in the double digits, things like that. The big problem we had was it's a subtle economics point, but when you have these cost push inflation forces bearing down on you, as we had in the 70s, the natural rate of unemployment, which is as low as you can go without spurring inflation, went from about 4% to 6%. And the government didn't realize that. So they kept trying to stimulate their way out of the recession. And because the structure of the economy had changed, it didn't work. And so we got into this inflationary spiral. What Volcker did, and it was very, very painful, is he immediately tightened policy, and he was able, with Reagan in office, doing his tax cuts and supply side efforts, to stop all of that in its tracks. And we were really lucky that it ended so quickly. Okay. So it was all based on expectations. If you go back to where it started, it wasn't Nixon, it was LBJ, guns and butter, the Vietnam War, and the Great Society, right?
Yeah.
But what Nixon's guilty of is appointing Burns, and Burns is guilty of running a printing press, and that forced Nixon's hand on the dollar. it was the French. They did it to us. The French broke the gold standard back in the World War One, World War II era, and they damned if they didn't do it again with the dollar in the early 70s.
Mm-hmm. I know that Johnson's spending in the Great Society and the war, that was all a precursor to it. But, when we cut that last tie to gold, it seemed like the government could just run rampant and just become out of control. Do you think the country, if we get into that same type of situation, would a Paul Volcker even be possible nowadays? Because it just seems like there's no willingness whatsoever, no political will to suffer any pain, even if it's for 8 months, to just fix everything, right?
Well, there wouldn't have been Paul Volcker without Ronald Reagan. It's kind of like you need kind of that dynamic. You need a Trump and somebody,
right?
So,
although interestingly, Trump
talk.
He was really pressuring the Fed to just loosen. So,
well, but look, I was there. Like in Trump time, talks a lot about that conflict, right? And here's the thing, Powell, when we were there, we were going forward with policies that kept the unemployment rate low, but the labor force participation rate rising. And what that allowed us to do is constantly maintain a 4% rate of unemployment, yet people were coming in off the sidelines, so we never got inflation. And productivity was going up, real wages were rising. There was no inflation, yet Powell was behaving as if there were. Now he had it exactly wrong. Now that we have inflation, he's got it exactly wrong again because he's too loose. I mean, it drove me, the boss and I, in the Oval, we have discussions all the time. And Mnuchin, I talk about it again in the In Trump Time book, Mnuchin was the guy who convinced the boss to put Powell in there. And that was like the worst mistake Mnuchin ever made. And we used to just rag on Mnuchin all the time about that because Powell just didn't get it. He cost us a point of growth a year for 2 years with his policies. And now he just gets it wrong. We had no inflation then. We loose monetary policy was fine. We got it now. But we don't need a printing press.
Yeah. He's been sort of pretty clear that he doesn't care about inflation. I mean, they called Ben the helicopter man.
He cares about getting reappointed.
Yeah.
He cares about getting reappointed. He has this fantasy that somehow a Democrat is going to reappoint Jay Powell to the Fed. I mean, dream on, dude. It's just not going to happen. So maybe you should do the right thing instead. But I take your point that in this day and age, no pain, no gain is not a philosophy or ideology that's very prevalent.
It's just not going to work anymore, is it? Yeah. So, Peter, with that, maybe that's a good segue to, where do you think we're going? How does this all, how does this crazy time work itself out? I mean, stagflation, we're already in stagflation, you would say, right? And by the way, just out of curiosity, what's your opinion on the real inflation rate right now? I'd be curious to get your take on that.
Yeah, I think I think the unemployment rate is significantly higher. And I think that the inflation rate that we should worry about is significantly higher. Here's the thing. The traditional wisdom, which has been correct in the past, is that only the core inflation rate matters. That excludes food and energy, right? The problem is that the reason why we've always only focused on core is we've assumed that food and energy prices are cyclical. Right? They don't trend structurally up. The problem we have now is we've got a clear structural shift in at least energy prices because of the forces associated with climate change, the Green New Deal, the shutting of our pipelines, this, that, and the other thing. We know that energy prices ain't coming down, right? Not in the Biden, Trudeau, Macron regime, right? Not going to happen,
look,
right?
I think that there's no doubt about that. Go back to candidate Obama in 2008, I believe. He was saying that he hopes gas prices would be $6 to $7 a gallon, so people would be forced to use mass transit and have proletariat electric cars.
Let them eat arugula, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, if we've got a structural shift upward in energy, we're also going to have a structural shift upward in food, because fertilizer is very, very energy intensive just right off the bat. And then there's the tractors and all of that stuff. So we're underestimating the inflation rate, and then we're underestimating the unemployment rate, because the labor force participation rate now is plunging again. And there's a lot of discouraged workers out there. So this problem is already worse than anybody except you and I and a few other folks are willing to admit. And, the In Trump Time book is important in this regard, because what we do is look, Bill Parcells, the football coach, once said, your score, you are what your score says you are. And what the score says Trump was somebody who maintained robust growth above expectations, rising real wages, secure border, peace with Iran, peace with North Korea, attacking China's economic aggression. And there wasn't, it was a pretty good 4 years for everybody, except for maybe some of those mean tweets that people didn't like, right? It's like,
big deal.
yeah, Joe, it's
Get
harder
over
than
it.
it looks, right?
Yeah.
I came in we were constantly criticized. We didn't know what the heck we were doing, right? That went on for 4 years. I had the Wall Street Journal write an editorial saying there was going to literally Navarro recession. It's like, hey, it never happened. Why? It's because we knew what we were doing and we just did it, right?
Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing. And that scares the heck out of me.
I agree completely. So more on where we're going. And feel free to throw in the discussion of the concentration of wealth and so forth, because it really does feel like the classes are just splitting apart. We've got this, the information workers who can work remotely, who can move, and a whole other segment of the economy that's just getting left behind.
The future under Biden is not bright economically. I think that the core principle, and I was the tip of the spear on this, buy American, hire American. I'm a populist. I'm an economic nationalist. For this country, with the abundance of the resources it has, the only way that we're going to insulate ourselves from these pandemic shocks is if we produce here. That's the secret sauce, because look, if you have the manufacturing here, you also have the supply chains here. What we learned is if we export our factories, the supply chains go with them. Now we're in a situation where blue collar America is going to be impoverished because we're losing our jobs again with Biden. This southern border situation is really so alarming, and it's going to have such a huge impact that we need to focus on that. It's like back in February, let me tell you a little story here real quick. The way we secured our southern border, there's a story in the In Trump Time book about me working with White House counsel Pat Cipollone. We were tearing our hair out trying to figure out how to secure the border for the president. And we were stymied by things like the Dolly G decision by Obama courts and things like that, which basically institutionalized this catch and release policy. We came up with the idea of threatening Mexico with tariffs. Like when we did that, people's heads exploded. But within 24 hours, we got Mexico to agree to send troops to the border, but more importantly, do this safe third nation agreement where they would keep the illegals on their side of the border. So we wouldn't have to do the catch and release. And then we did that with Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. And we were able to shut that down, right? Now we've got, Biden undid that with one stroke of his pen. It was the stupidest thing he's done so far. He's done a lot of stupid things. I predicted with that we'd have over 2 million illegal aliens coming in. What that does is it depresses the wages of the lower income people in our country.
I mean, that's so obvious. Why don't people understand that? But isn't this maybe just the goal of the authoritarians? They want to make these people more dependent on government. They're bringing in all this competition to take their jobs. They've been doing that for years, but then you'll hear them say, well, Americans just won't do these jobs. Well, I don't know. They did them in the 50s. All those jobs got done in the past.
Yeah, that's such tired rhetoric from the left. I mean, look, the Democrats are thinking, okay, these people are future voters. Bring them in. Yet the people who are supposed to be voting for Democrats are the people who are going to get hurt the worst. I mean, look, one of the great things about Donald Trump was that we saw a significant rise in the number of black men voting for Donald Trump. Why? Because they do understand that it was our policies which would lift the fortunes of black and brown Americans. Because of a secure borders, because of manufacturing jobs here. So
and look at the statistics. I mean, love or hate Trump, the facts are the facts. I mean, female unemployment rate, African American unemployment rate, it all went down under Trump. Trump gave hope to whole new classes of people that really just never had it before. They had jobs, they had productive lives, and the other party just keeps attacking that. They say they're there to help, but it's the complete opposite in practice.
Complete opposite. You look at Hispanics in the Rio Grande Valley now; they're just huge Trump supporters because Hispanic Americans down at the border are just getting inundated with the effects of illegal immigration. So, look, this is going to be very, very difficult time, with stagflation. It's getting unemployment and inflation at the same time. It's like, that's a rare event. But when you have that, you also get bear markets in both the bond and stock markets, and that's a rare event. But that's kind of for your investors listening to this. These are going to be hard times. And in the epilogue in Trump time, I lay out kind of where we need to go, both economically and in national security. And that's why I think the book's important. But we are moving swiftly in the opposite direction of all of that with this Biden regime.
Yeah, that's true. I think we're just going to see a decline in the standard of living for a large part of the population, and that does not bode well for a stable country, unfortunately. It doesn't matter if I'm rich. I want everybody to be enriched because a big middle class makes a country stable and pleasant. Who wants to live in a banana republic? It's really no fun, even if you're at the top of you got to have bodyguards and barbed wire, and that's no way to live. It's ridiculous. Any techniques, anything people should do, any action items that you want to share?
Well, I mean, look, if your show is primarily targeted at investors, these are very difficult times. I mean, the lessons of the 70s was like sit on cash until interest rates hit like 17% and then lock in long bonds and live on that for the rest of your life, right. Assuming that the hyperinflation ends. That was the pattern then. But I think that I think it's important for people to get one of the canons of the In Trump Time book is action, action, action. And I think it's important now for people to get politically involved. These policies, this universal vaccination policy, there's a chapter in the book In Trump Time where I talk about how in February of 2020, I play a key role getting Operation Warp Speed started. And I say that if we get moving today, we can have a vaccine by October or November. And that's exactly what we did. Tony Fauci, I fought him. That guy is evil. I fought him every step of the way. He made mistake after mistake after mistake. But we got that vaccine in Trump time as quickly as possible. But I only raise this now because I'm anything but anti-vax. But my view is that that we should be using the vaccine for people who need it the most, which is the elderly and people with comorbidities, people who have had the virus, have antibodies that are 20 times stronger than the vaccine. We shouldn't be forcing them to take it. And now you've got like airline pilots, NBA stars, NFL stars, healthy Navy SEALs, people in the military. They don't want that jab. It's just screwing up the labor market. And that's not over yet. That's going to keep rippling through this economy. I mean, if you lose 5% of your airline pilots right now, that's catastrophic. If you lose 20% of your military because these people don't want any part of the jab, that's catastrophic. So the hits just keep on coming. And I think, we need to reevaluate what we're doing in that Biden White House. And by the way, the book does deal with the fact that this election may well have been stolen. Controversial topic. But I've looked at it, and I put my Harvard pants on when I did it. And I'm telling you, that wasn't right.
Well, that's a rabbit hole we could go down, and maybe we should another day. But I'll tell you what is really maybe the most disconcerting of all, when we talk about the shots, when we talk about the election, I don't even want to say the word because I'm going to be censored, is the censorship of these disgusting big tech companies. I mean, that should be the biggest worry the human race faces. That's what people should be more worried about than anything. And look at how this is such a slippery slope, all of this stuff. The government wants us to give up sovereignty of our own bodies. And if you think about it, just think back to 10 years ago, how everyone was up in arms about the NSA and the spying and the monitoring all of our communications. And nobody is talking about that anymore because we've all just accepted that is the new reality. And soon we're all going to accept that our bodies, we don't have sovereignty over them. That's the new reality. And what's next after that? It's one thing after another.
The Chinese Communist Party infected this country with a deadly virus with the help of Tony Fauci. And somehow they've turned us into them. It's the irony of our times that a lot of this government fascism with respect to mask mandates, economic lockdowns, vaccine mandates. It's straight out of the Communist Chinese playbook, and they are laughing at us right now.
Yeah, that's pretty scary stuff. You depersonalize people by making them cover their face. This is, on so many levels, this is a tyrannical dictator's dream. What's happened, the surveillance, the money, the control, everything. It's just that let's just hope it doesn't deteriorate further than it already has.
I can't promise you that. The In Trump Time book is a heavy read, but there is a way out. We'll find it if we can. And, it's just, this is a strange time.
It sure is. Peter, give out your website.
Sure. PeterNavarro.com. You can go there. It's intrumptime.com as well. I'm PK Navarro on Getter and Twitter. I don't know if you're familiar with Getter, but I call it the Twitter killer.
Yeah.
And I'm using that more and more. And it's a better technology than Twitter. And here's the thing. It's like Twitter it censors you. They shadow ban you.
Of course.
I put stuff up. Here, I'll leave you with this. It's like, I'll put a video up about the book on Getter and Twitter. It's the same video. It's the same language posts. I get 10 times the response on Getter that I do on Twitter. And the only way that can be happening is if Twitter's screwing around with my followers and feeds, because I've got like close to 200,000 followers on Twitter, about the same on Getter. And I get a 10-to-1 different response. There's something wrong with that.
There is definitely something wrong with that.
He needs to go down along with Zuckerberg.
Yeah, these people should be indicted for crimes against humanity. What they are doing is so anti-democratic. It's anti-American. It is just awful. The rest of them beyond those names, there's obviously more. But Getter is
at Google. Soros plays a big role in the In Trump Time book.
And don't forget what Amazon is doing to workers and sellers and all. There's just all sorts of, I mean, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And these people just become way too powerful. But that's GETTR is Getter.
Yes.
And that's great. A marketplace for ideas. That's awesome. And Peter, since you are so influential, for whatever it's worth, I just want to maybe give you an idea too. And please share this and promote it. You've probably come to the same conclusion yourself, but I've been saying for like 8-10 years that these tech companies, one or three things needs to happen. Number one, bust them up under antitrust, nothing big there. Number two, regulate them like utility companies under common carrier laws, so they have to treat people equally regardless of their beliefs. And number three, expose their algorithms so they're public. And we know why when we go and search Google or look at our Facebook feed or Twitter feed, why we see what we see, or more importantly, why we don't see what we don't see.
Yeah. Well, go back to the In Trump Time. In the In Trump Time book, in the epilogue, I call for the breakup of Facebook, Twitter, and Google. So we are on the same page, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. And Amazon is doing it to books too. So, and of course, your book is available there, but who knows how it'll show up in the search results. Yeah. All right. Well, Peter, thank you so much. A lot of wisdom. We really appreciate you sharing this with us, and keep up the good work.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.